Early 2010, a strange new battlefield appeared. Not in North America, not in Europe, but in the crowded PC bangs of South Korea. It looked the part with recognizable weapons, vehicles, and factions. But longtime fans quickly noticed the differences. Battles swelled to a staggering 100 players. Unique maps were added alongside revamped favorites. And game modes radically different from anything the franchise had seen before or since were introduced as series firsts, including one with zombies. Behind this odd spin-off was an ambitious plan. EA's push to capture one of the most competitive gaming markets located halfway around the globe, fueled by the hope that its premium FPS juggernaut could thrive in a free-to-play world. What followed was a gamble that tried to chart new territory for the series, only to become one of its strangest, most divisive experiments. This is the tragedy of Battlefield Online. Released in the summer of 2005 to resounding success, Battlefield 2 from DICE and Electronic Arts marked the franchise's first leap into modern-day combat. The game revitalized its series' tried-and-true 64-player action with contemporary maps, weapons, and vehicles, while features such as commander-led squads, a ranking system, and the innovative battle recorder further set Battlefield apart from the competition. Longtime fans and newcomers alike responded immediately. The game sold over 1 million copies in its first month on home computers and surpassed 2.2 million within a little more than a year. Yet even as Battlefield 2 was steadily conquering much of the world, one region remained largely untouched: Asia, more specifically South Korea. Since the release of StarCraft in 1998, South Korea had seen an explosive rise in PC bangs, public gaming cafes where people could spend a small fee to play by the hour, as opposed to investing in expensive gaming rigs at home. Free-to-play titles naturally became a staple in this environment, as they didn't require expensive per-computer licenses in order to be installed. And by 2005, Korean video game companies were cashing in on the trend. Nexon, the publisher behind titles such as MapleStory and Cartwriter, reported a revenue of over $230 million that year, 85% of that figure from virtual item sales in its freemium titles. Sensing an opportunity, EA tested the waters in 2006 with FIFA Online, a free-to-play adaptation of its blockbuster football franchise launched exclusively in South Korea. With over 4.8 million registered users and roughly 600,000 people playing it daily at the height of its popularity, the publisher had struck gold. FIFA Online became a runaway hit thanks in no small part to the contributions of EA's Korean development and publishing associate, NeoWiz. Their successful partnership convinced EA that the market was ripe, and in June 2007, the two companies announced a new strategic collaboration, this time to bring Battlefield to Korean gamers. Considering its popularity in the West, Battlefield 2 was the logical candidate to serve as a design template for NeoWiz's freemium endeavor titled Battlefield Online. To do their ambitions justice, however, the development team reasoned that, first, an upgrade was in order. NeoWiz producer Choi Ee-jung explained in an interview with GameDonga that the free-to-play title was in development on the Battlefield 2142 iteration of DICE's proprietary Refractor engine, and noted the more advanced tech would pave the way for many of the bold plans and improvements that his team had in mind for the project. For example, the upgraded engine allowed for the entirety of the game's environments to be better optimized, which, according to Choi, all but erased the dreaded load times seen in Battlefield 2. In elaborating on the game's technology during a back-and-forth with RuliWeb, Choi also mentioned that the team had spent an entire year fixing lag issues, which made Battlefield Online, in his words, 5 times more efficient than the original in terms of performance, and added that because of these refinements, the game could theoretically support up to 100 player matches, well above Battlefield 2's 64-player limit. When talking to Game Mecca about the different features that would set Battlefield Online apart from its Western predecessor, the producer mentioned better onboarding for beginners, redesigned map layouts to promote more engagements between players, and the planned inclusion of new nations to join the game's Russia and the USA teams as sub-factions after launch. In addition to this, Battlefield Online would see the introduction of game modes that were, at the time, entirely new to the franchise, such as Domination and Tank Escort. Choi even hinted at what he called a metagame that would see clans fight over territory in large-scale conflicts similar to Siege Wars in MMORPGs as another series first. If there were still any doubts about the ambitious nature of the project, EA Korea game director John Tae-ik dispelled them in an interview with Inven, revealing that internally the project had been nicknamed Battlefield Asia, which underscored the publisher's desire of expanding the franchise across the entire Asian market. With those lofty goals unveiled to the public, the developers made their final preparations to put the game in people's hands. Choi explained to Afrika TV that the stark differences in distance and culture between NeoWiz in Korea and DICE in Sweden, who had supported much of the pre-production and development stages, yet kept to strict 5-day work weeks and regular vacations, ended up causing many headaches for him and his team. While this situation was hardly ideal, the producer believed that feedback from players, not the franchise's stewards, would serve as the key to Battlefield Online's success. For better or worse, that's exactly what the team at NeoWiz faced when the game went into beta during the spring of 2009. Battlefield Online went through rigorous testing before the team declared it ready for public eyes. When selected groups of players finally entered the free-to-play shooter's closed beta, however, many among them were left wondering what exactly they had signed up for. Participants criticized the game's lackluster visuals, arguing that NeoWiz's many optimizations had come at the expense of graphical fidelity. Core features like Battlefield 2's squad and commander systems were removed entirely, while others, such as factions, were altered so drastically that testers often struggled to distinguish friend from foe. Even Choi himself admitted that, among other complaints, many testers described the game's UI and accompanying hit markers as an eyesore. After gathering all the feedback and data, the team began improving the game in earnest. Ongoing closed betas and focus group testing not only revealed key weaknesses, assuring fans that the developers were listening to them, but they also signaled to both EA and NeoWiz that South Korea had genuine appetite for a Battlefield title, with a reported 100,000 players participating in its final beta before launch. These efforts pushed the game back significantly, however. Originally slated for 2009, the free-to-play shooter finally released a year later, providing a Battlefield experience that left many scratching their heads. With entrenched rivals like Special Force, Alliance of Valiant Arms, Sudden Attack, Crossfire, and Warrock, all long-running shooters backed by years of updates and loyal fanbases, Battlefield Online found itself facing an uphill battle when it launched on PC in March 2010. It didn't help that, aside from the game's ability to boast up to 100-player matches without too many issues, reviewers and players alike struggled to find much else to be excited about. While squads and commanders did return from their absence in the beta, every other change that NeoWiz had made to Battlefield 2's original formula was almost universally maligned. From simplified weapon ballistics and the removal of firing modes, reducing rifles to only shoot in full auto, to reworked vehicle mechanics that made aircraft easier for newcomers, but simultaneously stripped away layers of depth for veteran pilots, the game drew criticism from seemingly every corner for playing and feeling like an awkward marriage between Battlefield and the most popular South Korean first-person shooters around it. Battlefield Online's more demanding system requirements, on account of the switch to the upgraded engine, which itself presented bugs and glitches that weren't present in the original, left many questioning why the barrier to entry had been raised for a game that should have been easier to access and play than its Western counterpart. But the harshest criticism was directed at the game's egregious monetization system. Battlefield Online featured a condition mechanic that imposed in-game penalties, such as reduced stamina and lowered weapon accuracy after a certain amount of playtime. Unlike in many of its competitors, however, these values didn't automatically recover over time, and players had to spend in-game currency known as BP to fully restore their sprinting and aiming capabilities. BP was only sparingly awarded after reaching specific milestones or completing certain objectives, and so the only solutions forced upon users were to either keep playing with artificial handicaps in an attempt to earn more BP, the only means by which those handicaps could be removed, or purchase BP directly from the game's store. Making matters even worse, weapons and gear in Battlefield Online were either time-limited, vanishing from the player's inventory once their rental period expired, or consumption-based, degrading with each use until they broke permanently, forcing players to spend BP to buy replacements. This, combined with the game's 7 different classes, each with its own set of equipment requiring upkeep, as well as the currency spent on maintaining the condition system, meant that users were left with little choice than to fork over real money if they wanted anything close to a playable experience. Fatigue and weapon durability mechanics were nothing new in South Korean free-to-play titles of the era, but with Battlefield Online, EA and NeoWiz had somehow outdone their competitors in sheer audacity.
하나 잡혔고요. 지금 양쪽에서 들어오네요.
좋았어.
나이스.
Go.
Despite its flaws, Battlefield Online still managed to find an audience. Many South Koreans appreciated finally having a Battlefield title that was more accessible in their country, and they held on to hope that NeoWiz would, in time, shape it into a more stable and feature-complete experience. In response to player feedback, the developers rolled out a series of patches aimed at fixing the game's most glaring issues. And although the infamous condition system saw little change, regular free content updates introduced unique features that continued to set Battlefield Online apart from its Western counterpart. Beyond exclusive maps, weapons, and customization options, the free-to-play title eventually allowed players to fight conquest battles in 32-player matches with AI-controlled squad mates under their command. The game also introduced unique PvE modes. One sent up to 4 squad members on a mission to capture Russian army bases, fend off waves of enemies, and ultimately face the final boss, Commander Drago. The other, called The Walking Dead, threw players into the chaos of a zombie outbreak, challenging them to survive for a set time limit. In this mode, collecting souls from defeated undead unlocked character upgrades, and players could wield special weapons unavailable in any other part of Battlefield Online. Unfortunately, while these additions provided the game with some much-needed variety from its otherwise middling online action, they too drew criticism for being buggy, boring, outright broken, or, in some cases, a combination of the three. For every half step forward, Battlefield Online stumbled 2 steps back. That perception was solidified when, along with the many content updates, NeoWiz rolled out its most controversial rework yet, which streamlined the game's class system, consolidating its 7 different kits into medic, engineer, anti-tank, and sniper, while crucially removing class-specific primary and secondary weapon restrictions. This made it so that someone playing as an anti-tank could, theoretically, equip an assault rifle and a shotgun while simultaneously carrying a rocket launcher. As if the massive balancing issues introduced by these changes weren't enough, NeoWiz also added a range of weapons and equipment that many players felt truly cemented Battlefield Online's reputation as a paid-to-win game. Among them was a purchasable helmet that could negate a limited number of headshots per match, allowing those who had it equipped to even survive direct tank shells to the head, a handful of times each round. While the community grappled with the challenges laid before them by NeoWiz's polarizing updates, they were simultaneously shaken by what came to be known as the Ingyo Rebellion. A clan of so-called idlers made a sport out of sabotaging matches, blocking aircraft takeoffs, crushing teammates with commander assets, and even handing over vehicles to the enemy. NeoWiz's solution was to implement a vote-kick system, but this only spiraled into what players mockingly dubbed the Kick Wars, as griefers organized to expel normal users en masse. With all hope for the game now well out the window, many decided to abandon ship, either defecting to the competition or returning to the mainline Battlefield titles that, for what they lacked in accessibility, at least provided fans the functional gameplay experience Battlefield Online could not.
Electronic
into a cooperation agreement with Chinese company Changyu.com to bring EA's Battlefield Online game to China. It is the latest installation of...
In the spring of 2011, EA, still undeterred about expanding Battlefield Online's foothold in neighboring countries, partnered up with Sohu Changyu and Game Mania and granted them licensing and publishing rights to create localized versions of the free-to-play shooter for China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. A series of open betas started around late 2012 for the Chinese rendition of the game, and while it sported minor regional tweaks in addition to a unique tank mode, the shooter remained in large part identical to its South Korean counterpart. When testing concluded with little fanfare in April 2013, it not only marked the end of the game's short-lived expansion into wider Southeast Asian territories, but Battlefield Online as a whole. Roughly 1 year prior, iNews24 reported that NeoWiz and EA had split after failing to reach an agreement over the renewal of contracts for FIFA Online 2's domestic services. Its sequel, FIFA Online 3, was to be developed internally by the Seoul-based EA Spearhead, with publishing duties for it along with all the company's then-upcoming South Korean free-to-play titles like Need for Speed Edge and Titanfall Online assigned to Nexon. Following the acrimonious breakup that later even resulted in a court case between the two companies, NeoWiz would officially shut down Battlefield Online in March of 2013, a mere 3 years after its debut in South Korea. And so Battlefield's conquest to capture the Asian market came to an abrupt and unceremonious end. EA's efforts to find its flagship FPS a new audience with freemium monetization models briefly lived on in the West through Battlefield Heroes and Battlefield Play for Free until they were both shut down in 2015. Not for a lack of ambition, NeoWiz worked tirelessly to introduce Battlefield to an entire country of potential new fans, but for all its exhaustive gameplay tweaks, technological upgrades, and countless additions to tailor Battlefield 2 for the Korean audience, it seemed the audience itself simply wanted Battlefield 2. Thank you for watching our video. We'd like to take this time to thank, by name, the generous Patreons who have pledged to our Hall of Fame reward tier. Disco Cobra 2013, Ice Cold Water $1, Karu, Sauerkraut, Shuan Chinwin, Fat Green Dragon, and those currently subscribed to our producer reward tier: Dave Oshry, Juggernaut, DCX NG, Crash Course, Edward Rains, C-Rob Kaysen, Fallen Asterisk, Jan Christofferson. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to our channel and backing us on Patreon.